Welcome to Platemark, the podcast where we dive into the sprawling ecosystem of the print world. I'm your host, Anne Schaefer. Today, we're bringing you a History of Prints episode. We're heading to 18th century Venice, a city of masks, canals, and incredible theatrical splendor. Joining me is our resident subject matter expert, our s2e, Tru Ludwig, to help us unpack the work of two titans, Canaletto and Tiepolo. While many see Canaletto as a mere documentarian of cityscapes, Tru and I are looking at how he actually manipulated reality to create the ultimate grand tour souvenirs. We'll also explore the whimsical, light-as-air etchings of Tiepolo, whose scherzi and capricci moved away from the heavy Baroque into something more spontaneous and imaginative. We're talking about the birth of the caprice, the power of the autographic line, and why these Venetian masters still capture our imagination centuries later. It won't surprise you to know that this one took us a while to get through, about 2.25 hours. So I'm splitting it up for you. I'm going to split it into three. The first part of this three-parter is sort of a preamble. It went on for quite a while about Venice and it's coming out of the Baroque and into the Rococo. So it's kind of a look back at Titian and all of those people. And then the second one will look at Canaletto singly, and then the last one will look at the father and son Tiepolos, Giovanni Battista Tiepolo, the father, and Giovanni Domenico, the son. All the images are over on the website at platemarkpodcast.com. All right, let's dive in.
Hi, Anne. Long time no see.
Long time no see. Yeah, so we're doing a thing today, and of course, before we got rolling, we wanted to tell you all who we are and where we are. I'm at the Purple Crayon Press in Baltimore, Maryland, which is where we record every time.
Thank goodness.
And I am a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her.
And the Purple Crayon Press is in the land of the Piscataway, Conoy people.
It is.
See, I stole Anne's line.
That's all right.
I am a gay, white, trans man, and I'm really happy to be alive.
And it's gotten so much easier for us to say those words. It's amazing.
Yes, Anne has taught me so much.
It's great to be together again. We're moving on in history here.
Yes, we are. This was supposed to be a love letter to Venice when Anne got back from Venice. After her smoochy, I'd have a big, significant anniversary present.
Yes.
But it's a little late, but should give you some happy, comfy vibes from your sojourn in the...
Yeah. If you ever get a chance to go to Venice, it is otherworldly and worth the trip.
Yeah. Now, how long were you there?
We were only there for 4 days, 5 days.
Yeah, but come on, that's...
It was so beautiful.
Were you led around?
Well, I mean, we took a tour and then met up with the curator, Amy Worthen, who was a guest on the pod.
Of course, and because she knows it, because she lives there.
Yeah, so we went to the Scuola where she works on... Yeah, so it was great.
It all sounds very schnazzy.
It was great.
Well, so this is the episode on the Venetians in the 18th century. It's interesting when I'm teaching art history, because when I'm teaching Renaissance through 1855, which is basically what people would call, your art history survey 2, art history survey 1 is essentially caves to cathedrals, prehistory to Gothic or what have you. And then art history 2 would be essentially things like the Ninja Turtles to, let's say, Monet, because I never get into the 20th century because that modernisms is a whole nother 20th and 21st century. I think of it as a trifecta.
It is a tripart, isn't it?
It really is, especially now that we're all the way into the 21st century. So when I've been talking to the students, and we usually start in the late Middle Ages, and we start with Giotto, who should have been a Ninja Turtle but was denied. And we work our way through the 15th century, and we get Masaccio and Botticelli and all these other fine humans. And then we get to the High Renaissance, and it always includes 3 very important Ninja Turtles. Donatello we already did in the 15th century, but the Ninja Turtles that we have to talk about for the High Renaissance might be Miss Anne.
Well, let's see. We've got Raphael. Mm-hmm. We've got Michelangelo. Mm-hmm. Who's the third one? My God, I've blanked.
This guy here?
Which guy?
Him,
Leonardo.
Yeah, that guy.
Oh, that's hilarious. I can't believe I forgot him.
Leonardo.
Maybe my brain's not on tonight.
Well, you always say that when we're doing this. And then all of a sudden you come up with something and I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. Well, so the thing is that basically when we're talking about those 3 Ninja Turtles, Leonardo and Raphael and Michelangelo, they're essentially, Michelangelo and Leonardo are essentially Florentines. And Raphael, the young pup, Raphael Sanzio, is essentially working in Rome.
Isn't he from Urbino?
Urbino.
Urbino.
Or that Venus. Oh, we'll talk about her too. So these folks are all of the Florentine and the Roman aspect of the High Renaissance. And so I try to come up with a way to couch the difference between these guys and the Venetians, because it's a completely different planet.
Well, it's not the same country yet.
Well, they're not even really countries, in fact.
Right.
But, you have Rome, which is a papal state, and then you have Florence, which is a republic, the Florentine Republic, and we have the Venetian Republic. And that's very different compared to the other parts of Italy. But what I try to do is let the students see on the screen right now, I have an image. Do you see what it says right here, Anne? What does that say?
It says Ninja Turtles are superhuman.
By disegno.
By disegno.
By design, yes. and so I have Leonardo's Last Supper, and I have Michelangelo's Sistine Ceiling, and I have the School of Athens by Raphael. So we have something from like about 1498, and we have something from 1504 to 1508, and we have something from 1508 to 1512. High Renaissance, boom, all right there in this pocket. And basically, High Renaissance, it just doesn't get any better. So the reason I try to put this together is so that we can take a look at what the High Renaissance meant prior to the two death knells of the High Ren. Okay, so one of them would be something that was started by Martin Luther in
1517.
Very good.
The Reformation.
What did he do?
He nailed his theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral.
Cha-ching.
Well, it was a church. It wasn't a cathedral, was it?
That's right. But yes, he
Semantics.
did. He did. He nailed it, and those were his objections to what the Catholic Church was doing, and that started a whole snowball. I mean, obviously there'd been there'd been murmurings bubbling up, but boy, that was the big bomb right there. And the second hit was the sack of Rome. And if we were to look at what High Renaissance meant, and my punch list shows, I say sculptural forms of these figures and how they're presented as they might have been presented in antiquity. What you'll see, particularly in Rome and in Florence, is a lot of frescoes or tempera painting, because oil painting hadn't really caught on yet. It was just getting there. It didn't really arrive down in the south of the Alps until about 1476.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the rapidity with which these fellows figured it out, that's just crazy. Like painting 1 and painting 2. I figured it all out in 2 semesters. Yeah, right. So frescoes, though, you have this kind of process that you have to do on a wall and quickly with a design underneath, and you got to know where you're going to get going. Other things I would say would be that these themes tend to be very stern. They're very intellectual. They use epic masculine kinds of virtues, and raises her eyebrows.
The birth of the patriarchy.
Oh, of course. Okay, the grandeur of the ideal. There would be lofty religious themes or heroic and sublime kinds of themes. The Last Supper, the entire creation of humanity, from Genesis all the way to the fall of man, or the School of Athens and the greatest poets and artists and philosophers of all time.
Great thinkers.
All those smart people. And the other thing that you'll notice about all of these compositions in the High Renaissance is that they're very stable. They're laid out cleanly, mathematically. They use a beautiful sense of linear perspective. The compositions are stable and they're scaffolded so that nothing could be moved and it can't be harmed. Now, that's Florence and Rome, but then we have something that goes down and it's an issue. That is the sack of Rome. And what I do is I try to remind the students, I show them a map, and I have this really fabo quotation that I like to read for them. Quote, "They wept a lot. All of us are rich." That's how one of the participants summed up the events of May 6, 1527, when a mutinous army under the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V of Spain savaged the city of Rome. The imperial troops were fresh off a campaign against the League of Cognac, with whom Pope Clement VII was allied, but they hadn't been paid in months. To keep them on the march, their commander, the Duke of Bourbon, had promised them a chance to plunder Rome.
Just for fun? Like, were they after?
Yeah, they're like, okay,
this will be your reward.
Yeah, you get to go fuck something up because you haven't been paid. So the impoverished soldiers arrived on May 6th and launched an assault. The Duke was killed during the fighting, but his men breached the defensive walls and poured into the city of Rome. The Vatican Swiss Guard were all but annihilated during a famous last stand near St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Clement, meanwhile, was forced to escape via a secret tunnel and barricade himself in the impregnable Castel Sant'Angelo. Once inside Rome, the leaderless army devolved into a bloodthirsty mob. Buildings were looted and burned. Men and children were tortured and killed, and women, even Catholic nuns, were raped or auctioned off at public markets. By the time the imperial army finally left the city, Rome was stripped bare, and half of its 55,000 inhabitants were either dead or homeless. The cultural blow was equally severe. Scores of artists had been killed, and many priceless artworks were destroyed or missing. Some scholars have since used the 1527 sacking as the official end date of the Italian Renaissance. Huh. And with this map,
It's depraved.
Oh, well, yeah. There are some really remarkable prints that document the sacking of Rome. And, we could show those, but they're out there. It's fascinating to see how these historical prints from the time can document how they're taking the Pope. Think about it. The Pope is imprisoned. And Sistine Chapel was used as the barracks for the soldiers. Right. And they were stabling their horses in St. Peter's. Right. And remembering this was also because, Charles V had, was thinking that Rome had gotten out of hand. It was far too debauched. And, he took it over. He's kind of like, I don't know, Trump thinking he should take over from Maduro, I think.
Well, yeah.
I'm just thinking that there's parallels in some of these things, maybe.
Also,
at any rate,
always is.
So if you look at the boot of Italy and you think about the stability of the high Renaissance, and then you think about this absolute apocalyptic thing that went down, you have to take a look at Italy and you start noticing at the tippity top of the Adriatic Sea on the right-hand side of the boot, at the very top of it, I have a bright red arrow pointing to something, very large letters. What does that say, Anne?
It says Republic of Venice.
It says Republic of Venice. It's not a duchy. It's not, the kingdoms of Naples. It is a Republic of Venice. And Venice is a completely different planet than Florence or Rome. And they hadn't suffered as these areas had. So, this is a perfect time.
But still a Catholic.
It is.
Heavily Catholic area.
Yes, it is. But here's the thing that's so interesting about Venice is because it's so cosmopolitan. And it's a crossroads. So what I'm actually showing, literally a crossroads, because it is one of the stops on the northern passage of the Silk Road that had been in place, since the beginning of this millennium. So you have the fact that it's in such an ideal place, in the Mediterranean basin as a stopover for the caravans that would go all the way across to China. And it's right at this marvelous nexus of trade and different kinds of cultures. It's not that far from Turkey. So it's incredibly mixed and interesting. Even if looking at San Marco Cathedral, I have a photo of this here just so Anne can describe to you because she was just there.
I was.
What makes this cathedral look so different, Anne?
Well, it's fascinating because it has these Moorish elements to it. And it really is a mix of East and West. And
completely.
Yeah.
Right? And it has these onion domes and it's got, and I think it's something like 1064 or something like that when they started it. It's almost a late medieval version of neo-whatsoever style of the Victorian, if you look at how it's such a pastiche of things.
Is, yeah.
And then you also have lovely, charming things like the Rialto Bridge, and you have a city of canals, and it's up there at the tippity top, and it's been pretty stable. It has a good, strong maritime trade. It has a good defense. It's in a magnificent position for trade and stability, but it's a completely different region in terms of the light and the color and its placement on these lagoons that come on, you took a tour. Tell them a little bit about what, come on, you wandered those canals. What strikes you about it?
Well, for us as modern people, the thing that struck me and my husband, Chris, so much was how at night, how quiet it was. There were no cars.
Yeah.
There are no
roads.
There are no bikes even. And it's just footfall along the alleyways, which are basically the streets, but they're tiny.
Yeah.
And it's just, you just feel like there's you almost feel like there's no electricity anywhere. Like you just feel like you're in such a different world.
You are.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And it's managed to preserve itself so well.
It has. We sat on the Grand Canal for lunch one day and watched the workboats going up and down. Like, usually you're taking pictures of the gondolas because they're so picturesque. But I started taking pictures of the skiff with the kegs of beer.
Oh, yes.
And the trash guy. And then there was the guy with the radiators and the HVAC stuff. And then, it was just, that's how they got around.
This is life. We got to have that stuff too. And yet it's sparkling with these middle-aged kind of things. You have wonderful high Roman style central plan churches. You have Palladio doing his designs. It's just...
And the sun reflecting and bouncing off of the water onto the buildings, everything glows even when it's not nice out.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful.
And it is a different planet. And even in, overcast days, it's
still stunning.
It's peculiarly magical. And I think the quiet is a lovely thing indeed. And so I show my students these pictures of the canals and the aerial views of this incredible city that was wrested from, marshland, and they drove piles into the earth. How the hell they managed to do it?
The construction is insane.
Yeah. And it's still there. And there are all these clusters of islands of beautiful trade and whatnot. It's ridiculously, visually, arrestingly beautiful. And so, we have a place that is completely different from where our boys in Florence and Rome were. And the climate is completely different. And one of the things they don't do a lot of, in Venice, is fresco. Why would that be?
It's too damp.
Of course, the city floods. I mean, come on. The whole Palazzo San Marco is, and then if you walk through San Marco Cathedral, and you remember how it's it's like walking across almost like Iowa's rolling hills. It's really disconcerting and quite lovely. So you can't have frescoes. That's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be using another substance.
And you might use wood, but
that's going to have a problem
also.
Right. So, what are they probably going to start painting on, I wonder?
Well, there are lots of boats around.
Yeah. What do they make those boats go with? Certainly not petrol.
Sails.
Yeah. And that's sails are made out of
canvas.
And they're going to use this new stuff, it's oil paint, which is really nifty. And they've got artists that have started to use that. And Bellini is the kind of the granddaddy of this triumvirate of great high Renaissance Venetian artists. And so I'm showing Anna a wonderful oil painting by Giovanni Bellini, who was working, this was probably from about 1510. And I have a pastiche of things here, because if you look at Bellini's Madonna and Child, there's a St. Peter on the left-hand side, and there's a St. Jerome on the right-hand side, and St. Cecilia's playing her little violoncello there in the center, and it's lovely, but it's framed in actual architecture. But the image within it, what are you noticing that seems to be somewhat different than you might see in the South? Like, I have a Masaccio kind of linear perspective thing here for you.
Well, it's not a chapel on the side of a cathedral apse at all, because you can see through to air. So it's like a passageway in a courtyard or something.
Yeah, in fact, the landscape is something that appears constantly in religious paintings of the Venetian Renaissance. And I also will show my students 2 images of the greatest pincushion saint of all of the Renaissance, Saint Sebastian. And so there's one by Montaigne, and it's very dry looking, isn't it? It's wonderful, strong, articulate in terms of its musculature. And then there's another one by Antonello da Messina. And what makes these 2 Saint Sebastians look different to you? Just a clang response. What makes them seem different?
Well, the setting, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have different numbers of arrows in them, and nobody's particularly bloody, which is fascinating. Behind the Damascena one is a city square and architecture behind them with the sky.
And look with the sky. And look at the color, the light, the warmth of it. Completely different kind of vibe, right? And the other reason I'm showing you this Bellini is because the dome, the semi-dome under which the Virgin is, you notice how that's a
mosaic.
A gold mosaic. Huh. You mean like the one that's inside of the San Marco, which is unlike any other cathedral. The entire interior of that thing is done with gold mosaic. And so you can see the Venetians are using the various kinds of weapons in their arsenal of cool tricks, right? They're using oil paint, they're using different kinds kinds of surfaces. If we compared Bellini to Piero della Francesca, who is, a master of linear perspective, these are both oil paintings.
What?
Yeah.
The Piero della Francesca?
It's an oil painting.
God, I'd forgotten that.
Right? And just look at how it's the softness, the warmth, the Leonardo kind of sfumato that you see on the Bellini. There's a lovely physicality to them that's not as, I don't know. There's something.
For me, it's like Jane Austen's Regency and the Piero della Francesca. Everything's white and everyone's in sort of minimal stuff. And the Bellini is kind of like comes into Victorian. There's lots of extra stuff that helps you understand
warmth and
the
texture and the coloristic range is just so much richer.
I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's what
I think it's pretty tasty. And if you look at it on your little YouTube channel, I think it's fun to compare these things and just see how differently the regions behave with their kinds of paintings. And so, when you think about the sterner, masculine, virtuose, and how sculptural these forms look by Piero della Francesca, and the folks on the right in the Venetian one, they kind of look like folks that are looking at books, kind of looking down at the ground.
Right.
They have softer body forms. They
seem to be unaware that they're in the presence of Christ.
Yeah, they're all kind of busy doing their I'm busy reading.
I'm busy showing you I'm a saint with my thing.
Yes, my attribute is
my attribute.
I'm doing my job. Well, so the other wonderful thing, and this was always so exciting to my older students that when I was teaching out at the community college, is I show them something like Giovanni Bellini and by his pupil Titian, and it's the Feast of the Gods, which is a wild leap from a change from what we would have seen in Florence or in Rome. And Anne's going to tell you what she's seeing in the Feast of the Gods in this tasty, tasty painting.
Well, it's so funny because I've never looked at this and thought, oh, tasty.
Well, it's a feast.
It is a feast. Yeah, it's Feast of the Gods. It's like little vignettes, little things are going on. And I always wonder about the relationships between the people. Like the maiden in the middle who's got a bowl in her hand. Like, who is she actually looking at?
You got a satyr that's running off with a thing donkey, of wine. An ass that's doing his thing.
And is that Paris leaning on the barrel?
Probably, and then, and look at that glorious blue sky.
Yeah, it is pretty.
And the backlighting of the trees. There's no mistaking this. It couldn't be anything but Venetian. And then the other thing I'll say, well, you guys take a look at it. Like, look at how casually these people are all kind of sitting around. They're gods. They're all these Olympians that are having a grand old time out in the countryside. They're quaffing and noshing and having a wonderful time. And then I do a couple little close-ups. You should have just seen Anne jump. I show them one of the little moments where, what you see there, Miss Anne?
There's a couple sitting in the center on the ground, though, and the gentleman in a green robe has his hand in the crotch of the woman in pink.
And she's just kind of munching on her little pear there.
She doesn't seem to be enjoying it, really, but she's also not pushing him away.
Exactly. She's like, hey, baby. This is so freaking Venetian, right? And there are other moments within this. For instance, off on the love this over here on the right-hand side where the guy's leaning over the sleeping girl, like kind of lifting up her skirt. Hey, she's asleep. I can look up her dress. And so the older student, like Roland Lutz, he'd been a professor in New Jersey. And he's like, I find these quite interesting. And his wife like whacked him on the shoulder, Roland. Because there were boobies and things.
There's boobs, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't get a lot of those in the South much, So beautiful, lovely landscapes. And then, for instance, you have Giorgione's, this strange little vignette. What do you see in this one, Anne? The Tempest.
Oh, yeah, the Giorgione. Well, I've always found this one weird. Like, what is she doing sitting on the bank with a baby suckling on her teeth?
Well, she's a Romani, we would say now, a gypsy woman.
But why is she completely undressed?
Why not? It's Venice.
I don't understand. I've never understood that.
It's strange weather. And the guy that's looking at her is in German apparel. He's a German mercenary.
Oh.
But the neat thing about this painting is that it's only 31 inches tall by 28 inches. It was probably, he painted it because he wanted to.
Oh, okay.
Like nobody asked him to. With it, you also see the Pastoral Symphony that is a very famous painting by Giorgione or Titian or both. They bat it back and forth. But in this, you have two wonderfully nude women you have two musicians that are playing their instruments out in the countryside while a shepherd goes wandering. This beautiful landscape drifting back into the countryside. This is not the kind of thing you would have seen in the South. And I'm using all of this as a way to couch the mentality of the North already. In Venice is way different. And so we get to Titian, who should have been a Ninja Turtle, who lives for so long, like 86 years.
Wow.
At least. And his fame was so pronounced, and he painted for 7 different crowned heads, and he completely revolutionized the sense of what painting could be, and the use of color and oil, and the way he divides up space. In this particular instance,
wasn't he, the word I'm looking for is a person who works for the government who's a ambassador? Wasn't he like a?
He never left Venice.
How could he become that famous? It's crazy.
Because you could roll up the paintings and send them to Spain. You could roll up the paintings and send them to the South, to the North.
This changes the market completely.
Oh, God, yeah. And think about it. You're on a trade route, right?
Right.
He's also designing those prints for the Vesalius on the fabric of the human body. But the various things that I want to point out here is I have now on the left, I compare Leonardo's Madonna of the Rocks. I have my students do an essay where they compare Madonna of the Rocks from 1485 by our buddy Leonardo to the Virgin of the Pesaro family, which is from about, 1518 maybe.
By Titian.
And they're both, virgins and childs. But I'm asking you to describe what you see as the difference between these two images, just in terms of the way they're presented, in terms of their composition.
Well, the Leonardo is high Renaissance, classic stability, pyramidal composition. And I love how they're all pointing. That's hilarious. Everybody's hands are doing something.
So the language of gestures.
Oh, that's so
lovely,
interesting.
Lovely.
Yeah. And with the Titian, things feel topsy-turvy here. I mean, she's sitting on a pedestal of some sort, but she doesn't.
Up a flight of steps.
She doesn't look very secure, really. And there's this floating cloud situation above her, which makes no sense. I don't know. The whole thing just feels like something's about to happen, and it's not good to me, which may not be.
Well, because it's not static. And the Southern Italian would be pyramidal. It's solid. It's like nobody's going to fall over. The babies aren't going to fall into the little beautiful body of water. They're just solidly placed in space, and it's calm. It's serene. It's stable. The one on the right, the Venetian one, even in this sense, you can see a Turkish turban on the prisoner of war that's being dragged in. You see the flag of victory that they've won over the Turks. You see the Pesaro family on the right-hand side. You see St. Francis gesturing them towards the Virgin who's way up on the top of the steps. St. Peter, look at that glorious satin cape that he's wearing. Just the colors and the textures are just delicious, and it's in perspective. But look at those crazy diagonals. All new. The way the space is divided up. The thing I do is have the students start analyzing the difference between the South and the North. In the South, it's disegno, and that's a drawing underneath, and it's the pre-planning all of these things. And in Venice, it's going to be colorito. It's the idea of building the picture as you go along. It's not all laid out on a grid, and you don't pre-plan every last bit of it.
We know that's how they worked?
Actually, with Titian, literally, he would dash in some things, and then he'd put it away, and then he'd pull it back out and put some things in. And you can actually see him somewhat improvise as he goes.
Wow.
So, for instance, when you look at the meeting of, if we have Bellini's Feast of the Gods, you have Titian's meeting of Bacchus and Ariadne. Can you imagine having both of these in your mansion?
No.
But the family did, right? These are 2 of a series of 4, and it's all about gods. Meeting of Bacchus and Ariadne. Here we have Bacchus, and he's hopping off that chariot, and he's like, hey, baby, I want you. And you've got all this marvelous hubbub. It's theatrical, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And it's active.
Dramatic.
It's dramatic. It's got action, right? And there's people literally running. But if we compare that to the School of Athens, and they're essentially, they're within 20 years of each other. Disegno, the Italian Florentine Renaissance, if you think about how carefully, steadily laid out that is, you can see the scaffolding, the drawing underneath it. And it was praised and believed that the drawing underneath was so very important to the creation of a painting. But the North has, the Northern Italian has this completely different sense of colorito. Look how much more vibrant it is.
But how much of this I mean, nobody said, "Hey, let's improvise." It was because Titian had a facility.
He had a facility, and he also had paint that you can. It dries.
Move around.
You can move it around. You can go back in.
Redo it.
You can lay it
on.
Well,
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Because the frescoes, you can't.
You got it. Boom.
It's stock.
That's it.
Right.
It's like a woodcut.
Yeah.
It's on, or you break it out. Right. You have to paint it into that plaster. It dries, and that's it.
So it's a combination of materials, imagination, and facility.
Yes. And so the improvisational, the play can come in with the oil painting far more easily than with this prescribed, very crystal clear thing. And so I use that as a way of staging, it's not like, here I'm showing Bellini's Sleeping Venus from about 1510. She's out in the landscape. Now I'm comparing her to Botticelli's Venus. And if you think about how this is tempera, the Botticelli is in tempera, the oil paint of the Venetian, it's the way he's playing with the color and moving us. Look at the way that landscape undulates back into the distance. A beautiful aerial perspective. And you can see, can you see how it almost looks like stage flats stepping back back and back. And, both of them draw from that concept of the Venus or the Aphrodite of antiquity. But the Venetian one there's a babe that's out there asleep. Anne's eyebrows just fly right on.
Oh,
it bothers you. Well, just don't worry. There's going to be an update.
There's so many of them.
Yeah, but wait, I have more. I'll even let you put in my zesty bit. So, Bellini's pupil Titian does his version maybe, let's say 25 years later. And here you have the Venus.
Hand over the crotch is the...
That demure, come on.
The demure.
The Venus pudica.
Instead of the leaf,
yes.
Fig leaf?
Yes.
Okay.
But, we still have breasticles and we're just this glorious, soft, warm, yummy tummy skin. But you can see that
they're almost like the same person.
Almost.
The tummy, the boobs are so similar.
The style of what beauty is, right? And here's our lovely, Titian red hair and this concept of what is beauty and how we use color and how we stage a scene all the way back. And I just thought I'd give you a couple more Titians. Anne's eyebrows are flying up again, just because it was in Cat. How I had mentioned that Raphael had painted something like 800 Madonnas and Childs.
Is that true?
Well, God. Yeah. But here, Titian had his, cottage industry of Venuses too. So here's a Venus and the organ player. And then there's an updated version of about 3 or 5 years later, another version of what's more beautiful, what you can perceive by the eye or what you hear with your ears.
Oh, okay.
And then you have, another one and another one.
I've never seen the organ player. That's fascinating.
It's also funny because the Venus and the organ player. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so the idea is it keeps the students awake in a 3-hour class. But the concept of, that luscious red drapery and the beautiful white flesh and this comeliness and this adoration of textures and vistas and distance and landscape is really quite breathtaking.
The first Titian with the organ one, the Venus figure, I thought it was Rubens for a minute. That's
because Rubens loved Titian.
Yeah.
Because Titian mixes his paint with blood and Rubens idolized him. That's exactly right. Very good. I mean, yes, Rubens studied in Rome for 8 years and he adored Titian's work. Absolutely. That's that great chain of being. And of course they look like Rubens. They're all that, 30 or 40 pounds you've been trying to lose. That's what was gorgeous in those days. So, ladies, be nice to yourselves. So that concept of how we compose a space and how we approach drawing. The reason I'm couching this is because when we talk about the Venetian etchings, it's an outgrowth of this whole richness of their cultural heritage. The colorito and the movement of color and the way you can improvise a scene is so different than the beautifully planned drawing. In this case, I'm now comparing Leonardo's sketch of the Madonna and Child with her mother and St. John the Baptist, this glorious cartoon that's at the National Gallery in London. And it's about the drawing. But you see how blended and lovely that is. And the sfumato and the chiaroscuro, the shading and the light on it is, all of those things. And yet, there's a flickering liveliness to the kind of colorito, the use of all of these colors that the Venetians are using. And that holds true all the way through the 1500s. And so if we think about how all of these delicious images are being painted in a city that lives on the water in a shape, light that shimmers off water and has a completely different climate, atmosphere, culture, all of these things create a different liveliness to it. In this particular case, now I'm showing you a Tintoretto Last Supper, which comes from, 1590 maybe. And wow, that's a different kind of a Last Supper. What do you see there, Anne? It's always fun to watch your eyes flop open. What do you got there?
Well, it's bizarre. So the table with Jesus and the apostles is set at a very oblique angle. And there are lots of other people. I always think of it as being super frontal with just the characters that you need.
Exactly.
Right. So there's this whole party going on here.
It's kind of like a feast of the gods, only it's like a feast of the disciples, right? And wasn't it supposed to be like this is my body broken for
solemn.
You? And here it's like hubbub and serve these guys and get me more of this and that. And then you've got the chimerical figures and the light is just so bizarre and wonderful. And so if we think about what a difference 100 years makes.
Yeah.
And, what's the difference? 500 miles between Rome and Venice. It's very different. Now, admittedly, one's a fresco, one's an oil painting. It's the same subject.
Right.
But you can see that the aesthetic, the underlying sense of how to arrange a picture is different and how the rendering is done differently. And so, if we diagram how Venetian art is going to have these magnificent diagonals. That's just all there is to it. They've always got these lovely diagonals. It's theatrical. It's been that way. And the other thing I remind my students is if we think about how Florence and Rome are essentially, I tell them it's kind of like Washington, D.C. It's the head seats of power. It's logical. It's reasonable. And Venice is Venice, California, or Miami, Florida. It's got a completely different vibe. And that's how that we get to this point when we move into the next century. That's where this mentality totally shifts. I have to give you one more Veronese, and it's a Last Supper also. It's only 42 feet across.
Jesus.
Exactly. He's in the middle.
Yeah, but I would have thought it was a feast of the gods or the philosophers or something.
Exactly. In fact, it's set up in such a way that, well, for one thing, remember, it's supposed to be in the quiet upper room. But here's the thing, there are 52 figures in this Last Supper, and there's 12 Black people, and there's, and there's 23% other kinds of characters. There are dwarves, and there's midgets, and there's Germans in this. And literally the Spanish.
And some Turks, probably.
Yeah. And there's this, my God, what a raucous dinner. And look at how beautifully and deep into space. Does that not look like a stage set?
Yeah.
Well, Veronese was drawn up in front of the Spanish Inquisition, and they said, why did you paint this painting? It's the feast of our Lord, and you've put in Germans, and you've put in dwarves, and you've put in dogs at the feast of our Father. And there's actually a transcript of them grilling him. He's like, well, I painted a couple months. I don't remember what. There's a transcript of this. I don't. Well, he says, you know what? It's not really a Last Supper. It's the Feast of Cana. And so he just changes the title of it, but it is a Last Supper. Now, the other thing that you've got all of this, it shows you exactly how cosmopolitan it is, how you can we're in Venice. We can make the paintings any way we want. You notice how this Last Supper is set up under 3 wonderful barrel vault arches, much like a
triumphal arch?
Yes. And look at how in the center arch, you've got the big J.
Right. And
then under this arch, you have somebody, and under that arch you have somebody. So here, think about this, 1585, all right? Jesus is in the middle, got all his disciples. Who's the guy who's centered under the arch on the left?
One must be the Doge, I would assume.
Well, one would wonder who that might be. And who's the guy that's in, because they look very specific, don't they?
Yes, they do.
The guy that's on the left-hand side, centered under it, much like Christ, is Titian.
What?
And the guy on the right-hand side, and this was in a monastery, by the way.
Oh, holy cow.
And the guy on the right.
This is at the Scuola?
It's in a monastery.
That's in Toronto. Sorry.
Yeah, it's in a monastery. It was commissioned by a very wealthy monastery. The guy on the right-hand side is Michelangelo. And he'd only been dead, maybe 19 years when this was painted. Now, think about that. Think about the role of the artist. Think about how theatrical this is.
So, like Raphael would tuck a self-portrait in the corner. Like, he would never front himself like that. Right.
And here Venetian's like, Titian's a big, important guy. He's right up to Jesus. Now, you could kind of imagine that the papacy would have a little, I'm going to change the title. But if we think about how, again, what a difference 100 years make, and how the freedom of this city that is a republic, self-ruling, and remains successful throughout all of it, and has this magnificent, city hall with the Triumph of Venice in the middle of it that reflects the city and the color and the amazing perspectives. It's a wonderful forum to set the ground for what Venice becomes in the 18th century. Because as we move into the 18th century, as we've said in the past, we're talking about, what's that period we call the 18th century?
Enlightenment.
Yes, because we move from essentially the Baroque, through the Baroque, and then we move into the 18th century, and goes from Baroque, and we're still in the Baroque, but it's Venice. We're going to do whatever the fuck we want.
Okay.
But at the same time, we've talked about the Enlightenment.
We have.
But the concept of how much more research there's being done and how there's a lot more focus being put on education.
I feel like, there's something about society going beyond just survival.
Absolutely.
At a certain point.
Correct.
Right. And somehow some people have enough time.
Leisure and security. And Venice had this flowering. Now, admittedly, there's some political things that make it weaker. And by the 18th century, it's literally starting to dwindle a little bit. It knows it's not as strong as it once was, but it's no less smart.
Right.
And it's still a destination. It's still a place that wants to have smart images and smart artists. It has its own academy, because we know at the age of 21 that I think it's Tiepolo's in the Venetian Academy by the age of 21. They have their own academy, and they have their own standards and all of those same issues that we've talked about in the past. But the concept of what makes a proper artist is also knowledge of the past. And the other thing I wanted to put on the table here is how important the concept of the grand tour was to the city of Venice. In fact, you took a bit of a grand tour yourself, right?
Yeah.
Was it your 30th anniversary?
It was our 30th wedding anniversary this fall.
Ding, ding. Y'all went on a grand, at least a superb tour, right? So I want to put the idea of the grand tour on there because it's such an important thing in the education of all kinds of people.
The grand tour is about being cosmopolitan and knowledgeable about places far-flung and having an understanding of history.
Absolutely. So here we have a lovely young English elites of the 17th and 18th centuries often spent 2 to 4 years traveling around Europe in an effort to broaden their horizons and learn about language, architecture, geography, and culture in an experience known as the Grand Tour. The original Grand Tour, let's say, would go to the big cities because that's where the culture is easiest to get at, right? And the best tourist hotels are there, right? So you would probably start in London, you cross the Channel, you go to Paris, you go on to Rome and or Venice. Well, yeah, of course you're going to go to Venice. You might have some excursions to Florence, and you definitely take in eventually the cities of Herculaneum after they've found it. In 1739, eventually you start going to Pompeii once they'd found it in 1748. And, you would be able to do public transport. And some people would go as far as Greece. But it's really interesting to consider how essential the Grand Tour was to not only the education of people, not just the Brits, but to the economy of Venice, which just thinking of what you just said, it plays. So thank you for playing into the point I'm going to be making in a moment. So early modern Europe, it's the Grand Tour is an incredibly important educational journey. Of course, the people with money casual time, the ability to take that. Sometimes women got to take it. And sometimes their wealthy parents would send them. Sometimes they have benefactors. May I have a benefactor? Please, please, please.
Yes. Anybody want to be our benefactor?
Please. So, I have a bunch of different sites that I jammed some ideas together here. The Grand Tour became customary among British noblemen in the 17th century, following the end of the 30 Years' War and the English Civil War and other wars that were going on at the time. And certainly by the Treaty of Westphalia, which was 1648. And that's when the Netherlands gets, solidified, and Holland is it's Holland, and they're not having to protect themselves from Spain anymore. Peace was the rule, because after all of that Reformation hullabaloo and who's going to be Jesuit and who we're going to stomp out these Protestants, and it finally kind of gets locked into place. Tourists were guided by cicerone. The wealthiest could travel with a staff of servants. Tourists had opportunities to learn languages such as French and Italian and see works of European art and have themselves portrayed by a painter.
Oh, all right.
Think about all these kind of, package tours you could take.
Sure.
You would go to classical music concerts. You would see classical architecture, horseback riding, sports, all these other things. And here's another part that I thought was really interesting, was that the tour was not a religious voyage in itself. However, tourists from Catholic families would definitely go to the Vatican. And the Protestants would go to locations such as Wittenberg and Geneva and Lausanne, sites of the Protestant Reformation. And by the way, the word tourist comes from the Grand Tour.
Sure.
So thinking about all of that, by the time we get to the 18th century, young women are allowed to take it too. And I actually have a really neat map of the Grand Tour that Goethe took all the way through Italy and wrote it all up.
This went all the way down to Sicily?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Down to the boot. And then where the boot is kicking the ball that is Sicily. And you can see that he totally went to Venice. There's some marvelous images of him lounging around in that area. So the Grand Tour is a really fascinating thing to consider. And as you're going there, well, what are you going to do? Let's think about in the early days, when we first started talking about history of prints, you might pick up a print when you went to go see, let's do some kind of a pilgrimage, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would go to some kind of an altar. You would pick up a little print of your favorite saint or what have you. That it would be your protection on the road, but you would have some small image. Well, on the Grand Tour, you got to have stuff you can drag around with you. So what's convenient to pick up?
Prints.
And prints, because they're packable. And so, the concept of making beautiful etchings, almost exclusively etchings that some would say could almost seem like postcards, that's going to make perfect sense.
Because they're quick.
They're quick. Now, here I'm showing you ruins of Rome, but, the concept of all of these Brits coming down, and think about them going back up to dreary old London, and they've got this, I was there, and the light was gorgeous, and it was so nice. And, we saw the ruins and we took stock in it, and we have these neat little images of it. And with that, this is where I insert my very first print that I ever bought was on my little tiny Grand Tour when I went to Paris. It was 1990. And I bought my very first print, which is all of 2 by 3 inches, at the Bouquiniste stall on the Seine, right across from Notre Dame. And it is of the Paris Opera House. And it's right across this little...
It's sitting right there on the shelf.
And, and then the last time Anna and I went to a print fair, which was in November, I picked up a neat little print of the Bouquiniste stalls across the Seine from it. Sort of, meta. But these are the kinds of things that you could bring back. And it's like that special kind of evocative thing, or to have... like, oh my God, I saw that. There's no cell phones, right? So you have these glorious little images. Now that takes us to our buddy Giovanni Antonio Canal, and everybody called him Canaletto.
All right, everybody, that's where we're going to stop it for part 1 of our 3-parter on Venice and the Venetians in the 18th century. Hopefully that's a good reminder of where we are coming from and through to get to where we start with Canaletto next time. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about Venice. It's such an amazing place, and if you ever get the chance to go, do not hesitate. You should absolutely do it. All right, well, as usual, I'm going to thank my team, Dan Fury of Extension Audio. Thank you for all of your help. It's always needed and necessary, and I'm grateful. And to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music, and also to Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for the sounds they sent me from their studios that make up the soundscape at the beginning and end of each episode. As you know, the images are all over in the show notes. There's a ton of them, so enjoy those. And why don't you leave us a review this week? What do you think? Do it. Oh, hello, Harry. Meow. Go do it. Is there anything else? I think that might be it. To be continued.